this in part because unlike a lot of mariners who stay on the same ship, on the same run, back and forth their entire seagoing career, I was always on a different ship, on a new voyage somewhere different in the world. So I see my newest chapter in life with UUMH as yet a new voyage, and a new voyage of discovery at that. In truth, we are all on voyages at the same time, even a lot of voyages. We probably don't even realize it. One of the greatest scientists of all time was the British physicist Isaac Newton, and he established laws on motion. And his first law, he said that any object at rest will stay at rest unless it's acted on by a force. Similarly, any object that is moving will stay moving unless it's acted on by another force that slows it down or stops it. This is rather amazing to contemplate because in space, if something is going in a direction, it will go forever at that speed and it will never stop unless it's acted on by another force. Actually, this law applies to human beings too. In our own lives, we humans are always in motion. Within the confines of time and space, we are always moving forward from the time of our birth to the time of our death. It's true that outside forces can slow us down, or in some cases, cause us to stop for a time, but our voyage through life will always continue to its ultimate conclusion. As social creatures, we're on multiple voyages. We are constantly on a voyage with the family of our childhood and then our adulthood. We are on a voyage with our peers in school, with our partner or spouse, with organizations we work for, with our communities. We are on a voyage with America as it travels through the annals of time. Humanity itself is on a voyage. From the time Homo sapiens, that's our species, first walked the earth some 250,000 years ago, and forward to an unknown future, we have been on a voyage together. More about this later. The Earth itself is on a voyage. Earth has been traveling around the sun for some 4.5 billion years. Our sun and all its planets and everything that makes up our solar system are on a grand voyage, a big circle around the center of our Milky Way galaxy, a voyage that takes 250 million years. Our Milky Way galaxy is on a voyage where it orbits a common center within a cluster of galaxies. And the grandest voyage of all is a voyage of all the galaxies as they travel ever outward in an expanding universe to places unknown. And I'm quite sure there are voyages even beyond this, voyages beyond the wildest of human imagination. As noted, Newton's first law states that all these voyages continue uninterrupted unless acted on by another force. But even though individual voyages may be slowed or stopped, in this great scheme of things, these voyages all ultimately continue. The universe as a whole is on a great voyage. All the voyages within voyages will continue. Is there an end? We don't know, but I suspect not. Human beings are creatures of discovery. We use our voyages to discover new things. From our human origins in Africa, our species has been on voyages across the world. From Africa, Homo sapiens spread to Europe, then Asia, then North America, then to Australia, and finally across the vast Pacific. Curiously, long before the European and Chinese sailing age of discovery, through the 15th to 18th century, Polynesian peoples ventured forth across the vast Pacific to find new homes. And I mentioned this Chinese were part of the age of discovery too. A lot of people don't know that. The Chinese Admiral Zheng He commanded a huge fleet of Chinese ships which explored the Indian Ocean, the Middle East, and East Africa. And of course, Europeans took great risks on voyages to find new lands. Yes, some of these voyages were an effort to exploit native peoples and to exploit the riches of distant lands, but many of the voyages were simply inspired by the human desire to search and to explore the unknown, to go where no human, or at least no known human, has gone before. The same urge has caused humans to prod the depths of the sea, to venture to the planets. It is the desire to explore the reaches of space and to discover the mysteries of the cosmos. But these are not the only voyages of discovery. Ancient thinkers in Greece, in India, in China, in the Middle East explored new ideas. During these centuries, on either side of 500 BCE, the so-called Axle Age, many of the major religions of the world, really all the major religions of the world, were established. Prophets, gurus, shamans, philosophers, sages, and others began grand voyages of spiritual awakening, and they transformed the way human beings relate to the world and to the ultimate forces of the universe. They began to ponder ultimate questions of who we are, why are we here, and what is our destiny? So you see, on many levels, we humans are, in fact, on many voyages at the same time. And as Isaac Newton's first law of motion stipulates, since we are all in motion, we will stay in motion as long as no force acts against us. And even if it does, such forces can only slow or stop one or some of the voyages we are on. Despite anything that happens, we in the universe will continue to move forward to destinies we can only speculate on. Through vision and perseverance of many people in this congregation from 1986 to 1996, this congregation was established. I've read the history, it's fascinating. And back then, I was a member of the Brewster UU Church starting in 1985. I guess technically I'm still a member. I haven't been there in years, but I suppose technically I'm still a member. And so that a new voyage with this congregation began. And now, with me joining as your minister, still another voyage is beginning. Newton's first law of motion applies. An object in motion will stay in motion unless it's acted on by another force. I like to think that ours is not just any old voyage, but a voyage of discovery, a time when we can explore ourselves, our ideas, our beliefs, and challenge the things that we hold to be true and the things we hold to be untrue. It's no accident, in my view, that the age of discovery from the 14th to the 17th centuries was followed by the Age of Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th centuries. Bold sailors such as Christopher Columbus, Ferdinand Magellan, Vasco da Gama, Sir Francis Drake, Sir Walter Raleigh, Hernando Cortez, John Cabot, Samuel de Champlain, and others took great risks to expand the human understanding of the greater world. Because of their many voyages, these explorers caused Europeans to rethink their worldview and their place in the world. This was followed by great thinkers in the Age of Enlightenment, such as John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Adam Smith, Immanuel Kant, Thomas Paine, and the list is endless. These people literally shaped the world we live in today. So how does this apply to us? Well, we can be a passenger, or we can lead the voyage of our congregation and the voyage we ourselves are on as part of the congregation. We are explorers. We can be. American Unitarians and Universalists began voyages more than 230 years ago. They began as separate denominations with very different theologies and very different beliefs. But their long and complex voyages brought them together, and they merged in 1961. As I tell my students of world religions at Nichols College, religions and religious beliefs don't fall out of the sky. They're created and influenced by the social and political world around them, and most often by the religions and beliefs that pervade a particular area. In the early part of the 18th century, a religious revival called the Great Awakening occurred in colonial America. Actually, there's many parallels to the Great Awakening to what's happening today in the country, and this is not in a good way. In a nutshell, people in the American colonies became disillusioned by the religious institutions of the day. In the view of many, the colonies were becoming too secular. Existing religions were, in the view of some, focusing too much on ritual and custom and less on what was deemed most important, which was the Bible and leading a biblical life, or at least what was perceived by some as a biblical life. Preachers across America began railing against the lack of faith, the lack of religious practice, and the immoralities of colonial life. Long sermons preaching hellfire damnation became the norm. People were condemned who did not confess their sins in church and beg for forgiveness in front of the whole congregation. In fact, a lot of the Great Awakening was a reaction against Enlightenment ideas. That's the parallel to what we're seeing today. The rise of science and a call for the reordering of society based on secular law is not religion. Probably the most quintessential preacher of the period was Jonathan Edwards, who traveled throughout the colonies, creating as much fear as religious fervor. His famous sermon was "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." This 3-hour sermon was overwhelming, and people literally writhed in the aisles and fainted from fear. I won't be doing that here. The title of the sermon pretty much sums up the 3-hour narrative, "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." Reacting against these extreme religious views were liberal Congregationalists, some who even went as far as to say that Jesus was the Son of God, but not God, hence the word Unitarian. The Unitarian movement was born and became popular in New England, particularly Massachusetts. Unitarians at the time were largely comprised of well-educated and affluent people who were very influenced by Enlightenment ideas. The whole Transcendental movement, by the way, was a Unitarian movement. You don't hear about that in school, but it was. The Transcendentalists were all word you use, including Ralph Waldo Emerson, a Unitarian minister. Conversely, another movement arose about the same time of Trinitarian Christians, those who believed in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, yet these folks did not believe in hell, as most Christians at the time did, because they believed a loving God would save all his children, hence the word universalist, or universal salvation. That's where the word comes from. Universalists at the time were largely rural farmers and not very well educated. At one point, Universalists became the 6th largest denomination in America. From these very different beginnings and through the 19th century, the Unitarians and the Universalists grew their theology, their philosophy, and their beliefs and practices of social justice all through the 19th century. And as they did, they became more and more liberal and more similar in beliefs and outlook. In the early 20th century, both denominations embraced humanism and mostly turned away from Christian beliefs. In the latter part of the 20th century, in 1961, they merged into Unitarian Universalism, and soon they began to consider religious beliefs and practices from all the world's religions, focusing on the 7 principles, which draw from many sources. Most of you are familiar with these, and they're at the beginning of your hymnal, but a lot of people forget this. This is right in the beginning of our hymnal. So where do we get our beliefs? Well, it says, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Words and deeds of prophetic people, which challenge us to confront the powers and structures of evil with justice and compassion, and the transforming power of love. Wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. Jewish and Christian teachings, which cause us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Humanist teachings, which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against the idolatries of mind and spirit. And spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions, which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. When you think about it, there's a lot going on there, because we're called to consider really all the sources that encompass all the world's religions. all the philosophies, the beliefs, the practices, the traditions, the sages, the seers, the philosophers, the shamans, prophets. No other religion I know of, and I've looked, calls for its followers to think about all these things. So this is why I believe we are beginning a new voyage together, because together we will explore these sources as we learn and grow together, and as we share in a community together, dealing with all the challenges, the celebrations, the sorrows, the joys, and everything else that confronts us as individuals and as a congregation. My job on this voyage is not to convert you to anything, but it is, I believe, to challenge you to think, to explore, to imagine, to expand your vision of your world, our world, and the ultimate realities that surround us. I have spent my whole life, not just my years in seminary, studying history, philosophy, science, and religion, and I will continue to do so. I will not endeavor to preach to you, but I will try to teach to you. I do not expect you to agree with everything that I say, but if I share ideas and sermons that cause you to think, to challenge your ideas, to reconsider your beliefs, or to affirm your beliefs, then I think I'm doing my job. Yes, I can imagine from time to time some sermons will deal with the human condition and the world we live in. I may discuss the importance of honesty, of compassion, of social justice, of how to make a difference in the world, of how important it is to love our earth, and what is happening in a particular situation in the world, and so many other topics. But I will always share my insights in the context of where our UU tradition draws its sources from, and from a spiritual perspective. One of my passions as a minister is to help people with the challenges and problems and the tragedies and issues as they pass through the stages of life. I'm a trained counselor. I do have a master's degree in psychological counseling, and I have a lot of experience as a pastoral counselor. I will always be available by phone, by Zoom, or in person. And again, for starters, the best way to reach me is that new email address I have. I've already met with Pastoral Care Committee. There's Sue in the back. And I look forward to working with them. There's Debbie over there, and Debbie, Sue, and Mary. Where's Mary? That's your pastoral care team, and we're going to be working together. So that you know my schedule, I offer 2 sermons a month for 10 months and 1 sermon a month for 2 months. As many of you know, my usual home is my horse farm in Woodstock, Connecticut. I didn't know bow from stern on the horse, but I'm learning. I don't know how to ride, but my wife is the equestrian, and my daughter and my 5-year-old granddaughter. But I have a home here in Brewster, too. On the Sundays I have a sermon. I'll usually come down to the Cape on Thursday afternoon or evening and return probably on Monday to the farm. And during my days on the Cape, I will be in my office when I'm needed, and I'll be here anyway from time to time, and we can set up an appointment to talk. And when I'm home at my farm in Connecticut, of course I'm available by phone and FaceTime and by Zoom. So I'm available. In my book, which was published this last year, and the name of the book was Into a Gale's Full Fury, Stories and Reflections on My Years Sailing in the U.S. Merchant Marine in the 1970s, I described my first departure to sea at age 17 as an ordinary seaman and company cadet aboard a Faralline's freighter, the SS, well, it was the African Neptune. I call it African Galaxy in the book. This was the first ship I sailed on since coming to America. I came on the passenger ship United States when I was 4. That's sort of when I fell in love with going to sea, 4 years old. And I went back to sea at 17. So this is a quote from the book. 30 minutes before sailing, the gang was called out. The gang included all the unlicensed deck crew, including the bosun, the carpenter, the able seaman, and the ordinary seaman. Right at 1500, after taking in the gangway, the gang went fore and aft with some of the crew, including the bosun, going forward to the bow and the rest going aft to the stern. Already on the bow was the chief mate, and on the stern, the second mate. At the same time, longshoremen line handlers appeared on the dock to let the ship's lines go at the direction of the chief and second mates. In came the headlines, the stern lines, and the after spring. The docking master left the forward spring on to prevent forward motion of the ship while the crew hauled the lines aboard. Tugs pushed gently to keep the ship alongside the dock. Finally, the forward spring was let go, and the docking master called the tugs on his radio. On the Mary and the Pauline, back easy. Both tugs acknowledged with a high-pitched peep whistle, which indicated they understood the order. Then the order slow astern was given on the telegraph, and the Galaxy backed into the East River. It was nearly slack water, so the effects of the current were minimal. Once in the river, the docking master called on his radio to the tug on the bow. On the Mary, shove easy. The tug Mary's peep whistle blew, and black smoke poured from her stack as she pushed the bow of the Galaxy to starboard. As the rudder was put hard right, and the order half ahead was given, the Galaxy turned to starboard on a course to depart. The docking master then said his goodbyes and was escorted by the third mate to a waiting ladder held up by one of the tugboats. In a few minutes, the tugs were away from the sides of the Galaxy and on to another job. The harbor pilot then began issuing engine and helm orders to guide the ship toward the Verrazano Narrows Bridge and sea. It's been a long time, I promise. I was finally going back to sea. I was delighted. Well, I'm delighted to begin a new voyage with you. So let's let go fore and aft and begin our new voyage together. Peace be with you. Please join in our closing hymn, number 346. Oh, I'm sorry, we forgot that. Oh my, I missed that one. Sorry, we have to have that.